Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Own Thy Audience. Today we have with us a special guest. Hi, Veronica. How are you?
Good, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Staying sane and staying safe. I think that's the
Yeah,
answer to that question now.
true.
Awesome. So yes. So for all our listeners today, we have with us Veronica, Megan, Magan.
Okay.
Who is the director of growth and innovation, and she has a very unique role at her organization. And I'll sort of let her explain that. Veronica, why don't you give us like a quick 2-minute overview of what do you actually do?
Yeah, sure. So, for the most part, I work with our sales teams, kind of putting together proposals for our clients that mostly for like content marketing programs. My background is in journalism, so we put together these more advanced marketing programs for our clients that leverage our audiences and our editors, like their experience with the content. So it's all for very, very niche publications, kind of what you were saying before. It's, very technical B2B trade publications and events that we have. So I work with our healthcare, power, energy and engineering, satellite, aerospace, defense, these groups that have within them very specific publications and topics that they cover. And so these companies, like, I don't know, like a Honeywell, for example, would come and say, like, we want to reach this segment of your audience, and what do you got for us? And so it's a fun job to put together these creative programs for them, and for fulfilling these programs, and even for our own day to day, we need to grow our subscribers. We need to maintain our list and continue to grow them with very qualified people. And
Right.
so I think the way that we look at things like Google and Facebook is a little bit different from like a consumer publication, So I think that's like the gist of it.
Interesting. Now, this is exactly what sort of makes you the perfect speaker for this topic specifically, right? Which is why do media brands need to look beyond search and social in this day and age, right? And we've had a lot of guests and speakers on this podcast, on this show, who come in from, as you rightly said, consumer facing brands, right? Mainstream, masses appeal, and so on, right? And they have been, saying this. They have sort of, taken some kind of stand on uh, thinking or looking beyond search and looking beyond social, right? But then to sort of have you over here and have you operate in extremely niche categories, right? Defense, aerospace, aviation, healthcare, and not just mainstream healthcare. We're talking
Right.
like, which is actually wellness healthcare. We're talking like medical healthcare, right? Uh, how Okay, so before we even sort of dive into the topic, the first question that I have for you is, when you use the word audience, right, what's your definition of that word? How do you differentiate between a user and an audience?
So I think for us, our audience is mostly our database. So the people that we know and the people that we can market to. That's our core audience, really, because more and more we sell ABM programs, so account-based marketing. So we really need to know the people that we have. So our audience is going to be mostly our subscribers and the people that we know. Of course, on the website, yeah, we have users. We have like buckets for them, like casual visitors or prospective, the ones that look like they're about to convert to a subscriber, and then of course like are the ones that we know, and we know how they're coming to our site. So, but I would say that when we speak of our audience, we mostly speak of our database and the people we know, because that's going to be, where we spend most of our time.
Perfect. Okay. Now, given that definition, and I actually love that phrasing simply because you said people we can market to, right? Because it just automatically filters away everyone who did not leave a trace on your website, which is either a phone number or an email subscription or a push notification click or whatever else is there, right? But the ability for you to communicate with them is sort of what makes them, you know, fall in the audience category, right? Super. Now, uh, you operate in a super niche category, right? What is and you come in from a journalism background, right? Uh, what is your experience, uh, with audience development prior to this role, and what is it now?
Yeah, so before, when I worked more on the editorial side, it was all about, the content that we were putting out and how we could use it to convert people. So, we had like our daily news and just news briefs in general. This is kind of like top of the funnel information, if you will, trying to get people to come to our site. And that's where we leverage more, like, trying to rank on search and social. But after that, it was just looking at the next level of content that would be even more specific, and that's the one that kind of brings us the core audience and the one that we use to convert them. So it was mostly about content generation and being strategic about how we looked at the metrics and used them to make good editorial decisions. Right now, it's more on the marketing side, right? So we're working with our clients, and it's the same idea of like top of the funnel type of content, and then mid and getting people to convert for our clients as well. But the approach is a little different because it's more on a campaign based, it's a campaign based approach instead of just like a long-term recurring kind of approach with editorial, I would say. But it's still based on content. That's kind of the core. And as a media publication, that's also like the most value that we have for our audience.
Right. Okay. Now you said top of the funnel, right? That's what was is where a lot of energy goes in, right? Now, what you know, as somebody operating in very select categories like yours, right? What are your go-to spots, and what are the challenges that you see on those channels or platforms when you try to bring in more and more people to your site for the first time? What does that look like?
So, yeah, I would say like we try to bring in people to our sites for a couple of reasons. Obviously, we, for the most part, our sites are open, are ungated. And so we have display advertising on it. So we definitely want to meet our impression goals for our advertisers. But of course, we also have our own internal goals to convert these people. And so I think we use this dashboard from the Center for Cooperative Media. It's called the Audience Explorer. I found that really helpful to kind of see those buckets of people, right? And then trying to see how people are engaging with what content and trying to, produce a little bit more of that and maybe target these people with like a push notification and saying like, you like this, maybe you should read this other thing, or you've been here a couple times, so why not subscribe? So I think our goals are more in terms of, well, I mean, as of everyone's converting people and just looking at how people are consuming and engaging with our sites and even our newsletters, to do more of that, or, to just make strategic decisions in that way. I think the challenge is sometimes for trade publications, we have to ask a lot of questions from people so that we can dissect our audience in a way that makes sense for our partners and our clients. So it's a challenge sometimes to do that progressive approach. Like if you ask too many questions, all the questions that we would want to know about you, at first, people will be like, oh my God, there's like 10 questions here. I'm not subscribing. But then if we only ask for an email, for example, then it becomes really hard for us to dissect our audience and fulfill like a lot of our campaigns. So there's like this balance there that's hard to find. And on the other hand, it is kind of hard to just get that top of funnel to continue to feed, because sometimes you just get the same people over and over. And so, yeah, just having, like you said, trying not to rely too much on Google and Facebook. Every time they change their algorithm, we kind of have to like rethink where we see dips or in traffic and stuff. So it's just being creative, I think, and using a lot of the tools that we have at our disposal to kind of really hone in on a strategy and try to get those conversions.
Yeah, because also help me understand what kind of, so, I know for a fact that something like a Facebook or an Instagram or a Snapchat would work wonderfully well when you are, talking about new diet options, right? Uh, the latest snack in the market, right? Or how to get yourself proof, how to make yourself COVID proof and stuff like that. But how do you do that for a Honeywell? How important is social at all in these categories? Does it work at all?
It works, but it never competes with email for us. It's just something that we do because we also want the exposure. We want that the campaign has good amount of exposure out there. Obviously, a lot of our campaigns are lead generation for our clients. So, social is going to be more for like keeping top of mind for people that this campaign is happening. But we'll see most of our conversions through email, and most of our visits come through email. So for example, let's have a white paper program. And so we will have social messages and even display advertising on our site about this. And let's say the campaign starts today, but the email goes out next Tuesday. So between now and Tuesday, we'll see some engagement. But the moment we send out that email is when we see people fill out the form. And that just speaks to how our audience, our database is the right kind of people that we have, right? And when it comes to social, lately we've seen good conversions through Facebook, but again, I mean, it's not comparable to email. That's definitely where that's our strong suit. And as a niche publications and a B2B media company, like I think that's normal because yeah, people are very specific. And maybe now with LinkedIn, for example, where people are more focused on work stuff, it's an interesting experience there. But at the same time, what could work on Facebook, for example, is just like breaking through that clutter or whatever, but because you're used to seeing personal things and maybe you see something from work. But yeah, I would say it works. Yes, maybe not the same goals, Okay. It's like I said, it's more for exposure and keeping it top of mind. It's almost like product placement. And then we get a lot of conversions through email.
Got it. Okay. So you're saying email is your bread and butter and jam and cheese and everything else.
Exactly. The whole sandwich.
The whole thing is email. Okay. And how are things when you look at search or how do you approach search? Because obviously in your case, it's not like there are, some massive keyword clusters and then there's a long tail, right? I'm sure you would have some very different search or keyword patterns in your industries, right? How do you sort of maneuver your brand presence or, manage the intent and the quality which comes from search, right? With some of the other channels that you have.
Yeah, I think yes, for search is hard also because these are very niche topics that we cover. I think in general, trade publications will have, like a set of keywords that you use. I mean, if you're going to try to rank for COVID-19, you're not going to get it. but maybe like COVID-19 effects in aerospace, something longer like that might work. Yes, because that's, you know, something that we're covering for sure. So I think the the thing with search is just going to be, you know, I don't know that we get a lot of prospective subscribers, because sometimes, for example, a good example is like SpaceX. One of our publications, we cover that a lot because it's the space industry, but we get a lot of people, and I think traffic that is just going to be regular folk looking for the news and what happened, and they'll read it, and that's not our core audience. You know, I think it's good for bringing impressions for our display ads and keeping our metrics kind of stable. But I would say that our core conversions would come more from more specialized campaigns and more targeted campaigns as well, and using things like I said, like our own technology, where we know how many times someone's come to the site, and then maybe they're a good prospect to convert, um, or just using other tools, like external tools that will allow us to just be very specific about who we're marketing to. Like, you know, we have all these filters, and we can get new names that way as well. So search, it's still very important for us. I mean, we don't neglect it by any means. And it's just part of that wheel that we need to keep oiling in a way. So yeah, I don't know if that kind of answers your question.
It does, right? And it sort of also gives me my next question, which is the whole flywheel effect. Like, so there've been a lot of, so there's a school of thought in marketing that says marketing is a funnel, right? There's top of the funnel, you know, awareness, consideration, decision making, purchase at some point in time, and so on and so forth, right? And then there's a new school of thought that says, hey, you know what? Marketing is no more a funnel. It's really a flywheel where you have somebody who's anonymous. They make one small commitment. They make one more small commitment. And, you know, they sort of, you know, keep, that's when the sort of flywheel starts rotating. They bring in their friends. They mention your brand to somebody they know on social or email or text or whatever. But that's what sort of, you know, sets a flywheel in motion, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, as you said, you have search feeding in some of that flywheel. You have social feeding in some of that flywheel, sort of bringing you top of the funnel traffic for yourself, right? And then that's when you sort of take over and say, okay, you know what, I'm going to get you, once you give me your email ID, and as you sort of keep on engaging with us, we'll sort of, you know, set this in motion, right? So, you know, like, I want to break it down for us, right? What would be, you know, like, what are those 5 stages or 10 stages of that flywheel, right? Which you sort of like, which you obsess about, right? Like, what's the aha moment in that flywheel for you guys?
I think for us, it's going to be, obviously, yes, I know what you're saying with the wheel, and it makes sense because you don't want to be like, oh, this person converted, I got their name, done, right? I'm not gonna work with them anymore. Like, this is it. You obviously need to keep them engaged and make sure that they renew if it's that type of subscription. So it's just it's almost like that nurturing and that retention. That's very important, and that's definitely something that we do pretty much with our email database. I think for us, it's going to be being able to take this person from a web visitor to a subscriber to a newsletter or anything like that, to converting in one of our client programs is important as well. But also making sure that they feel like they're part of a community. And we do a lot of that with our live events, which right now it's virtual events, but normally it's live events. And giving people like a in-person experience and making them feel part of that community, both online, through the publications, making sure that, we're feeding them good content, that they feel like it's valuable for their day-to-day job, and then having those opportunities to network and learn more, continue their professional growth. So I think that's when I would say, and it happens sometimes from different directions. Sometimes it's people from the publication that attend our event, or vice versa, like people who just know about the event and then attending to it, they kind of convert as well to a subscriber from our publications. So I think that that will be the ultimate goal, is to have these people, these users, audience, feel part of that community. And yeah, and like you said, become like brand ambassadors and say like, oh my god, you have to go to this event, or you have to read this article and share things themselves too.
Interesting. So, because you said right, from an anonymous visitor, they become part of an audience. They become subscribers. They're actively engaging with you, and then at some point in time, they actually pay you a visit, either physically or virtually, and then they start becoming a active part of the community at large. Right now, the community component is really what sort of often is the reason why people stick around, because that's where a lot of value gets unlocked suddenly, right?
Yeah.
Value which you had not planned for, but a lot of serendipity happens in those community interactions, right? So, uh, how do you sort of manage that community today, right? Given the fact that there are so many different categories you work across, right? How does that work, right? Is that strictly events only? Uh, what are those? What are the tools you use? What's the frequency like? And this, those details.
So I think, yeah, it's a mix of things, for sure. We do try to keep people engaged from one year to the next if it's an event, right? And throughout the year, because the event happens once, we just want to make sure that we leverage our publications and the content that we're producing there to keep people engaged and not forget about our brand and the value that they saw at the live event. Because of that cadence, it's like, it's a long time that happens between events and one year and the other. So I would say that we have a variety of newsletters um, and other things that happen through the year. So webinars and yeah, like discussions in general, smaller, maybe virtual events through the year to keep people engaged in that way. And I do think it's more it is more based on our content and our email database. That's kind of how we keep these people obviously engaged. They're part of our audience. And we do leverage social as well, LinkedIn groups and places where they can exchange, people can continue to network in a way. So we do leverage social for that as kind of like an added value to it. But I would say it's still very much focused on our content and our email distribution.
Right. So content sort of remains the most important ingredient, and email remains the most important channel of communication there.
Right.
Super, fantastic. Right. So now I want to take a step back and also sort of talk about uh, the ownership. Who owns this internally within the company? Because audience development and audience engagement in a setup like yours, which is one, super niche, and second, these two are really extremely critical for the business to sort of grow and sustain and keep the flywheel moving, right? Uh, as somebody who has been on the editorial side, right? Uh, and I know for a fact that audience development uh, overlaps across both business and editorial, right? What kind of friction have you seen with editorial on this front? And also, how do you sort of draw out your KPIs, right? When it comes to audience engagement, what do you measure? And also more importantly, how do you measure that? Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in terms of like who owns it, I think it's spread out through a few different roles. And like you said, I mean, it kind of depends on editorial and marketing, because yeah, editorial is going to be writing the content. That's why it's so important to keep an eye on metrics and how people are reacting to the content that we're putting out, um, and trying to make good editorial decisions based on that. Not all decisions should be based on that, because sometimes, like I said, you get a surge of traffic from search because it's like a hot topic that maybe people even outside your industry want to know. So you can't really guide the direction just based on that, because you think, oh, people want to read more of this, and not technically, maybe not, maybe that's not your core audience. So there's a balance there. And in terms of our marketing teams, they also need to kind of, obviously that's where most, or traditionally that's where it's been more, the development has laid on our marketing team, right? It's just like, we got to grow our database, our subscription numbers, and it's mostly like a marketing job. But I think that's shifting, and it's just being spread more evenly with our editors as well, because they're the ones like in the front lines, and so they're the content that they write is going to bring in the people that marketing can use to nurture and help convert. So I think it's a little bit more distributed now. And in terms of wait, what was your second question? Sorry, what was the second part?
My second question was in terms of the KPIs, the exact
Yeah.
KPIs, that you and your team, obsess about. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that also varies between editorial and marketing, I would say, but, and even our sales team in general. But I would say KPIs for like our sites, for example, is trying to grow around 10% based on where we were the previous year. So the same period previous year. So trying to grow our metrics in general, trying to grow our page views, the number of users that come to our site, and how long they spend on our pages, and how many pages they see every time that they come. So those like the traditional metrics, right? But then we also look at our email and how people are engaging with those. So newsletters, open rates are important, as well as just click-through rates to know that we're doing a good job providing the content that people are interested in reading. We also look a lot at our actives. So basically people who are in our database, and they continue to engage with our email newsletters or any email that we send out over the last 6 months. So just trying to see, keep that number growing. And then the other one that we look a lot at too is going to be the known users. So like I said, we get all this traffic to our site, and we don't know all of them, obviously, not everyone subscribes. So just seeing how that number continues to grow. So known users would be meaning that we matched their web behavior to their demographic information, to their email or their company name and all that. So just keeping that growing as well.
Yeah.
And subscriptions.
Okay, cool. So you're saying, but what's interesting is the time frame you used, right? You said over a period of 6 months, right? I know for a fact that in the mainstream media or mainstream publications, they look at a much more shorter time frame usually. But again, that's the nature of the business, of course, right? So very interesting, right? So it's covered metrics and the overlap with the editorial side, right? How does sales respond to audience development, right? What's how do they sort of participate in these things? Yeah.
I think their role is a little different, but it's important because they kind of keep a gauge on what our clients are looking for. And so when we get these ABM programs, I think it's very interesting, because then we know, like, okay, we need to grow this part of our audience a little bit more, or maybe, in some cases that's like our strongest suit. But it's just interesting how they bring us, they keep this pulse on the industry as well, because B2B it's a little incestuous in a way, because the readers are also the advertisers. And so, it's not just so linear. It's like, like a terminating its tail in a way. So they help us keep pulse in the industry and know what the advertisers are looking for, who at the same time are our readers in a different way, right? So So yeah, I think it helps us understand where we need to grow our database and where the industry is heading. Same with our editors. Obviously, they're right there and know what's going on. But our sales teams are also, they bring an interesting perspective in that way.
Right, interesting. Okay, now I sort of want to talk about a bit more about your marketing stack per se, right? I know for a fact that publisher marketing stacks, right? It is in the mainstream media have recently been discovered, right? Because they've always had Google and Facebook at their behold. They're like, okay, you know what? We'll just throw a campaign on Google, right?
Yeah.
Or Facebook and sort of spin some users off, right? And guess what? It's the same audience. That's okay, right? But in your case, I'm sure you have a much more sophisticated marketing stack because of the kind of metrics you are talking about and using and tracking on a daily basis and so on, right? What does that look like today?
So we actually recently kind of converged some of our platforms. We used, for example, like Marketo for our email distributions, but also Lytics to measure how people came to our site and target them based on their behaviors. We kind of merged that now with Omeda, which is kind of like now our central database, and also how we email people, how we track their behaviors and track how they convert. But we also use other tools as well outside of that. So one that we're starting to use a little bit more is Netline. And that's going to help us, like I mentioned before, target more specific users than, like we said, we can't necessarily just say, oh, we're going to run a Google search, a paid campaign, or because it might not get us the right people that we need. And so we're going to be using those more specific tools that allow us to almost hone in on specific demographic information from users, specific companies or job titles, to be able to convert those or display our campaigns to the right kind of people. But obviously we use like Google Ad Manager, Ad Roll, and your typical like advertising stack, I would say. But yeah, I think it's been an interesting transition this year into Omeda and seeing everything into one place.
Right. Okay. So I actually have not come across a lot of publications using something as sophisticated as a Marketo, right? And then sort of moving away from it to build in more sophistication, right?
Yeah.
So, it becomes like a own, like a very, actually a very a standalone sophisticated stack, which you're used to, run and manage multiple media properties, right? And uh, and how does this sort of enable your like? How does this engage with your event component, right? Obviously, back in the day when we used to do physical events, right? How would it sort of how would it talk to those that audience, or sort of physical people who are walking to it physically, right? And how sort of things changed for you guys now, given the fact that everything has sort of been virtual for the past few months and will be virtual for the next at least couple of quarters or so. Yeah.
Yeah. So the way that we build our audiences in our database are going to be by market segment or by division, I guess, in our company. So obviously there's partitions within a same database, but we could leverage event attendees for a publication promotion or campaign. But I'm not, I mean, right now, because everything's virtual, we're just trying to get people who had maybe registered or planned to register for one of our live events to get
Right.
them to convert to more of a virtual experience. It's not the same, and it looks quite different, and obviously not never the same volumes that we would get in a live event, perhaps. But
Right.
so I'm not sure. Like, I understand exactly what you're referring to.
No, my question was really more on the marketing stack, how it used to engage how would marketers sort of talk to your offline event audience, right? How would you sort of bring it in this central thing, right? And would you sort of have new people also coming in the in those physical events as well?
Yeah, okay. So I think for our events, we, registration still, everything happens online. And so we'll
Okay,
immediately get someone's email. And so that goes into that central database
automatically.
that we
Yeah,
have.
yeah,
And we're able to track their behavior as well if they come to our site as a known
straight
user
away.
and all that. So I think it's going to be kind of similar to how we target our regular users,
Yeah,
because everyone just comes into this one place.
one system eventually. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Interesting. Okay, perfect. No, I think that's sort of. But what is really beautiful about what you guys are doing right now is the fact that is the playbook, right? Wherein the visitor becomes an audience, becomes a subscriber, becomes a part of the community, right? Either by participating in physical events or in virtual events, right? And at some point in time, you sort of also try to convert them into actual leads for your clients, right? Which is where you sort of probably unlock the highest value
Yeah.
from that visitor as well. Right? Super, fantastic. Thank you so much, for these, for the conversation. It has been really, really interesting. I will throw the floor open for questions now. Hi guys, if you have any questions for Veronica, feel free to ping me directly, or ping us in the Q&A section, whatever suits you. We're almost 40 minutes in, not bad. Okay. So Veronica, also help me with some, right? If you were to sort of really trivialize the 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 business, right, and the team, it's pretty much a content and an email business. If you really break it down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even with our events, I mean, it's content that we're putting out there.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just a different format, but
Hmm.
I think that's the core value of our publications. It's our editors' expertise and our content people's expertise to kind of go deep into those very specific topics.
Yeah.
And then we present it in a few different formats, but that's kind of and maybe that's my perspective because I'm a journalist, and so I'm always like, content is king. But
Yeah.
I think it really is. That's what we use to. That's where we see the most value, I would say.
Right. Yeah. All right. I have a question here. Somebody pinged it to me directly in chat. All right. The first question is, how big is your team? Okay, that's a abstract question, but let's go with it.
Okay, so I work with a few different brands, more in a central role.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say each publication has their own team, so their own marketer, a group of editors, and one, depending on the brand, a group of sales team people. I would say on our leanest brands, we have one of each, and
Right.
then there's that have a couple of each or even more. So it just really varies. My team, technically, from a central perspective, we're like 3 people on our digital team. But in general, I think we're a lean company, but it's also just so divided depending on the group that you're looking at or the brand that you're looking at. Then we're all like the same family.
Interesting. Okay. I have one more question here right now. Let me get this right. Uh, okay. It's a very, very tactical question, right? Uh, Newsletters are coming back in fashion. That's what the question says, literally, right? Uh, as somebody who has been doing newsletters for uh, for ages, what it seems like now, what's your advice for somebody who is starting fresh on their newsletter? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, newsletters never went out of fashion for us. I can say that. They're like really important for us. But yeah, no, I know what you're saying, and it's definitely true. I would say that just having a good a strategy for the different ways that people want to engage with newsletters. So some people are like cool with getting one every day, or depending. But some people are, more comfortable with once a week or bi-weekly. So just having a variety of offer to have her readers. So, maybe like a news, if you're able to come up with content every day, then a news feed or a new daily news e-letter could be a good one to start with. But if you're starting from scratch, I would say maybe even trying out like a weekly one and then building from that, or less than that. Just based, and I would say like the content that you produce would be the metric for that. Like, what can you support? You don't want to have a daily newsletter if you don't have anything to send, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think mostly it can't just be like, here's some content, period, right? You really have to build up that channel and use it wisely. So beyond just saying like, here's some new content, maybe using that to continue to build on that evergreen content that you have. And it's just like, well, this is from a few months back, but it's still pretty relevant. So check it out still. Any announcements, obviously, but just focusing a lot on the value that you're bringing to the reader. And, why would people actually spend time reading this? Subject lines are super important still.
Yeah.
And,
In fact, that actually is the next question as well right now. Metrics that you track for your newsletter specifically.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think one of the key ones is going to be like click-through rate. If it's a newsletter, if that's the goal of the newsletter, to bring people to your site. If not, if it's, that type of the newsletters where you have all the information in the newsletter and there's an opportunity to click through, but that's not the main goal of the newsletter. It's just really providing the value to the reader. I would say open rates are super important, and that's why always optimizing on templates and subject lines is super important. And even with the templates, just keeping it fresh every now and then, even if it's working, just being able to tweak and show people that you care and not just like set it and forget it type of stuff. But I would say like the classic, open rates and the click-through rates. Obviously, deliverability is very important. You want to make sure that people are getting your newsletters and they're not going spam and stuff like that. So more on the technical side, but yeah.
Got it. Okay. And I'll take this one last question before we wrap up. Plain text newsletters versus HTML newsletters. I think what this means is, the basic, the normal email type newsletters, like, versus the fancy ones, with the whole layout and stuff.
So it's interesting because for a consumer side, I think HTML works excellent because most people might maybe get it on a Gmail and stuff like that. For B2B, it's kind of hard to be very creative with them because a lot of people use Outlook, and Outlook will block the images. And also just they have some limitations depending on what version of Outlook you're using. And so for B2B, it's a little bit hard because we know we're getting people at their work email for the most part. And so we want to have them be able to see it. So I think HTML is still nicer and obviously provides like that, almost like that brand value and that like legitimacy. But you have to be careful not to overdo it because then people might not understand what's happening there. It has to be a balance. And it's like, well, if someone sees it this without the images on, will it work? And then, but that said, like plain text email sometimes just looks very overwhelming as well. And so people might not engage with it. So it's also there has to be a good balance there. But it also depends on the brand and the audience a lot. We have both. I think we have one of the most successful newsletters is like plain text, but that's been going on for ages and like that audience likes it that way, But we have made successful switches to like more of an HTML template, like I said, keeping it simple so that, we don't even try to put like GIFs and animations because most Outlooks will block them. So just knowing where your audience reads your newsletter and trying to make the decision that way as well.
Right.
That's a very interesting question for sure.
Sweet. Awesome. You know what? I'm going to hit pause on the recording button right now.